get started, I want to be mindful of your time. First of all, thank you so much to everyone who's joining. I'm very excited for this event today. Judge Hanen and Judge Garrison are not only wonderful judges, they're wonderful people who once led this organization, HYLA, and I think there's a lot we can learn from them about the organization, about practicing, and also right now during the time of COVID-19, how the courts are reacting to changing practice. So thank you for joining. Thank you for renewing your membership in HYLA if you did, and thank you for being involved. So I'll start with introductions. First, we have Judge Hanen. Judge Hanen grew up in Waco, Texas. He graduated from Denison University with honors in 1975 and attended Baylor University School of Law, where he graduated first in his class in 1978. Following graduation, Judge Hanen was a briefing attorney for Chief Justice Joe Greenhill of the Texas Supreme Court. He then moved to Houston, where he practiced civil trial law for over 20 years. In 1992, he was nominated to be a United States District Judge by President George H.W. Bush, and when the nomination lapsed, he was nominated again by President George W. Bush in 2002. He was confirmed by a 97-0 senatorial vote. Judge Hanen served in the Brownsville Division of the Southern District of Texas from 2002 until 2018, when he returned to Houston. Judge Hanen has been recognized as the outstanding young lawyer in Texas and as an outstanding young alumnus of Baylor University. He is a past president of the Houston Young Lawyers Association, HYLA, and the Houston Bar Association, and a past director of the State Bar of Texas. He is married to attorney Diane Dillard, and they have one daughter, our very own HYLA secretary, Kelly Hanen. Welcome, Judge Hanen. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
We also have Judge Garrison. Judge Garrison was born and raised in Albuquerque, New Mexico. She graduated from Oklahoma State University in 1997, where she met her husband. After graduation, the Garrisons moved to Houston, where Judge Garrison attended the University of Houston School of Law, graduating in 2000 with honors in both oral advocacy and academics. During law school, Judge Garrison began working at the law firm of Weiser, Kaplan, Pulaski, and Zuber, where she practiced law until being elected as judge of the 157th in 2018. Prior to taking the bench, Judge Garrison's law practice consisted of entirely civil litigation with an emphasis on appellate law. In 2008, Judge Garrison was elected president of the Houston Young Lawyers Association, and in 2011 was selected as the Woodrow B. Seals Outstanding Young Lawyer. When not at work, Judge Garrison loves to spend time with her kids, her friends, and her husband, oftentimes helping on her husband's championship barbecue cook-off team, and I hope we can recruit her to join our own HYLA chili cook-off team. Thank you for joining us, Judge Garrison.
Oh yeah, you're welcome, but there's no way. Judge Roth and I have our own cook-off team for the HYLA cook-off, and right now I'm the reigning third place pie champion.
What kind of pie do you make?
Oh, I can make. I love to make. But this year we made key lime, but it was a mistake because a lot of other people made key lime, and so it really didn't stand out. So I'm working on next year's recipe right now.
Okay, that'll be a surprise.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start with some questions for the two of you about HYLA, because we're the organization sponsoring this talk today, and I just want to know, how did you first get involved with HYLA? And Judge Hanen, maybe you can go first.
Well, I got involved. I was a member, but not a very active member, and then I had a older but younger, still a member of HYLA. Lawyer in our firm asked me to head up a project, and I ended up heading up a project with David Hittner, who now is one of our senior federal judges, and it began kind of what's turned into a 40-year friendship with him. And through that, I became more and more active in HYLA, and eventually became a director, and then an officer, and then finally president.
Judge Hanen, what officer position did you have?
I probably had all of them at one point in time. I know I was treasurer for sure, because I actually think that being a treasurer of an organization is probably the best way to learn about the organization, because you learn where the money goes. And usually if you know where the money goes, you know what the organization is focused on.
I agree. I was a HYLA treasurer before I became president-elect, and it was largely why I wanted to run for president-elect. So I said, I know so much about the organization now, having been treasurer, that I wanted to do more with that. So thank you. What about you, Judge Garrison? How did you first get involved?
So very similar. I had a mentor attorney that I kind of worked with that just when I got out of law school said, you need to get involved, you need to do stuff, you need to get your name out there. I worked at well, you mentioned at Weiser Kaplan, and it's a relatively small firm for Houston. And so there wasn't a lot of young people at the firm. At the time that I got out of law school, I think it was me, and then the next youngest person was 20 years older than me. So it was like you wanted some camaraderie a little, and someone suggested it to me, and so I got involved or joined, and then started like going, like everybody else probably, you go to the few happy hours, and then you kind of get recruited into a project by someone, and the next thing you know, you're the chair of the project, and the next thing you know, you're the chair of another committee, and then you just you keep working your way kind of up over time. So sort of the same thing, but I will tell you, I got to skip being treasurer. You know, there is kind of a natural progression of officer positions, and we had someone one of the years that I probably first ran for the board, not the board, but for executive committee, that had quit, and so there was going to be 2 vacant spaces, and Leif Olson and I don't know if y'all know Leif, kind of thumb wrestled for who was going to be secretary, and he lost. So he had to be the treasurer, and I got to be the secretary. So I got to skip that fun job. So sorry, guys.
Yeah. Alvin, our new president-elect, was also treasurer, and yeah, he knows it's a lot of work too. Judge Garrison, you mentioned that somebody at your firm recommended that you get involved with HYLA. I'm glad you found community in HYLA, as I have too. Did you find it to also help your career?
You know, yeah, I mean, I probably could sit down and point to 1 or 2 things and I'm like, oh, that helps, this helps. But it's more of like a life body of work. You know, you make connections without question that are helpful, and that are rewarding personally. You make a lot of good friends, but you meet people that do things that you don't do. You meet judges, you meet bar leaders, you meet, you kind of, you know, I always tell people it's kind of like you got to know your own business, right? You can't just be a smart lawyer. You've got to know what's going on in the legal community, and being in an organization like this, as a young lawyer, is a really good way to kind of start developing that understanding of how the legal community all fits together and what your place in it is, and how you want to navigate your way through your career. So, you know, could I point to one little thing and say, oh, that made the big difference? Mm-hmm. Not so much, but that, like I said, that collective body of work, and the fact that it really was a great foundation for everything you do after that.
What about you, Judge Hanen?
Well, I think Judge Garrison really laid it out well, and I agree with everything she said. On a more pragmatic basis, you get to know more lawyers as you develop, and what you're going to find out in your practice is you will get referred more clients from other lawyers than any other. And the fact that you know them and the fact that you've established a relationship will help you there. And meeting judges, if you're a trial lawyer, is important. And it's not important that, you know, if you go into their courtroom, they're gonna rule for you, because, you know, the fact that they know you is not going to help you necessarily. But what it does is it gives you the confidence that you feel confident going into their courtroom saying, I've been in Judge Garrison's courtroom before. I know how she conducts her proceedings. I feel confident being there, which is important not only for your own well-being, but if you happen to have some hearing that requires your client to be there with you, it's nice that the client realizes you're confident about being there. So in addition to all the things Judge Garrison says, I think it really helps you in a couple practical areas.
Yeah. I'm curious if either of you has advice on balancing what I'll refer to as extracurricular activities, like being involved in HYLA with your practice. So, some people are involved in HYLA, some people are involved in other bar organizations or nonprofits, or, their passions. For you two, having done it and done it so successfully, do you have any tips for balancing work and these other interests?
Well, I'll start off by saying, I think what you have to do is pick a couple areas that you're really interested in, that really coincide with your interest. And if it's pro bono work, or if it's a particular charity, and it could be in HYLA, it could be outside of HYLA. I mean, I had activities that I did and that I really enjoyed working with HYLA, but I was also on the board of a couple charities that I was really committed to. And so, but you can spread yourself so thin. So, I mean, my suggestion to everybody was pick one or two that are close to your heart and follow that.
Yeah, I think it's like, when you go on a diet and you're like, God, am I just going to go no carbs, or am I going to go no fat, or am I going to go no sugar? And every doctor tells you it's about everything in moderation. It's kind of the same philosophy. You need to be involved in the bar. I mean, smart lawyers are a dime a dozen. There's a lot of smart lawyers out there, but good lawyers who really, have that street cred, that know their job, that's a more rare breed, and that makes you more valuable long term. So you definitely need to do that. But you're right, Judge Hanen, you also need to balance it with community service and pro bono work, and still doing your job that they pay you to do. But this is also kind of part of what they pay you to do too. I mean, we all have a commitment to the state bar. I always say, your law license, it's a privilege. And in exchange for that, you owe something back to the state. And I think that comes in the form of community service, pro bono work, and then making the bar a better place for all of us to practice. And some of that's fun, but a lot of it's really serious, between CLE, different support systems that we have, policing our own profession. The list goes on and on and on and on. So I think we all kind of have that obligation to find a way to make it work. Now, I think the other thing too, when I got done being in HYLA, you had to take a little break after you be president for a year, right? Because that takes a lot. But then you kind of go, okay, well now I'm 37 or whatever, your age may be. And you're like, okay, what's that next group that means as much to me? Because I fit naturally in HYLA at that time. We were all young lawyers. We were all new in the profession. Well, I can't kind of find safety in that. And you just kind of, you try a few on, and eventually you usually find something that means something that is still meaningful in your practice.
Right. You both mentioned involvement with nonprofits, and Judge Hanen, you said you were on the board of a few. I've been asked this by young lawyers. How did you first get involved with those organizations? Did you start as a volunteer and then kind of make contacts and move your way up? What advice do you have for getting involved with nonprofits in the community?
Well, usually that's the way it starts. I've started that way as a volunteer, and then I got drafted onto a couple boards. And a lot of people are interested because a lot of times a board needs a lawyer. And for me, I ended up getting drafted to help initially just as a volunteer, but later on I became one of the officers of the Sunshine Kids. And I don't know if you've been to Minute Maid and you've seen the Sunshine pin on Biggio's jersey where it's hung up, or but there were a lot of things like that. Other organizations you might just be a foot soldier in, and that may be all the time you have to allot to it. And so for me, I enjoyed my first sticking the toe in the water with the Sunshine Kids, and I just continued to do more and more and more work for them.
Yeah. During these challenging times, something I've been giving a lot of thought to is my goals for HYLA for this bar year, 2020 to 2021. I was hoping that each of you could share, if you remember, what your goals were when you were president of HYLA.
Don't screw it up.
That's on my list.
That was goal one. You know, that's a hard question. And I know, and Judge Hanen probably has a perspective on this that's a little different, because HYLA is different than HBA. Like, each HBA president that comes in kind of has some like big project that they're going to do that is their signature project for the year. HYLA doesn't really work that way, right? And one of the things I loved about HYLA was it's also, because of that, because it's that structure isn't as ingrained, is that it's like somebody can come to you with an idea and you might think it's silly, and then you're going, no, that was really cool. And like, yeah, run with it. And they do, and it becomes a cool thing. And I mean, look, I'm a city girl from New Mexico, and I have never shot a gun in my life until someone during my year as president wanted to do this like clay shooting thing. And I would have never thought to do anything like that. And I'm like, that's silly. That's ridiculous. Nobody's going to want to do it. I don't get it, but great. If you can make it happen, go for it. And they did. And I went out and shot a gun. And so, you know, it's just, we also, at the time that I was president, it was right at the beginning of the recession. And so, unfortunately, a big part of what we had to focus on was cutting costs and maintaining membership. I mean, y'all have doubled membership since I was president. And so, you know, that's awesome. But we were running on a razor thin budget, and, you know, had to adapt to that. So there's the reality of it too.
Well, and we're dealing with some of that right now too, with COVID and everyone working from home and having to rearrange their priorities. But the Clay Shoot Committee is still going strong, and I've already emails from the chairs of this year that they're thinking about dates and getting it organized. So.
I'm glad you knew that that was called a clay shoot, because I couldn't even, that's how detached from guns I am.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't even know what to wear, and I wore like these really cute high-heeled boots, because I was like, oh, boots. And then we went out, and these guys are wearing tennis shoes. Like, they look like they were going to play golf. And I'm like, I look like an idiot out here. But it was fun.
That sounds fun.
I can say from our standpoint, and it kind of ties into what Judge Garrison said, when I was president, I tried to do, you know, keep the organization afloat, keep it running, get membership up. But there were two things I wanted to try to start at least improving. And the first one was to increase the diversity, especially the diversity in leadership. And during my year, we rewrote the Constitution, and I don't even know if it's the current one in effect or not, but we rewrote it to include minority directors and to try to get more minorities to participate on the board and in HYLA. And the second thing we did is somewhat pandemic related, but also it ties into what Judge Garrison was saying about you're young and you're willing to try new things. You need to realize that I was HYLA president 20 years before Judge Garrison was president, and that was almost, you know, 15 years ago. So it was some time ago, but it was in the middle of the AIDS crisis. And HYLA, my year, we started the AIDS committee to help individuals that were with AIDS, because Houston had a very high HIV positive population, and the legal problems they had and the legal problems their family had. And it was the kind of thing that what I would say the big bar wouldn't do at the time, at least, and young lawyers did it. And we got a wide variety of volunteers from all, segments of the young lawyer population. In fact, one of the more interesting sidelights to that is one of our first volunteers on that AIDS committee was Governor Abbott. He volunteered when he was a very young lawyer at Butler Billion, which is a firm that doesn't even exist anymore.
Well, and I think HBA, that committee was so successful, the HBA sucked it up.
They did. And they do that a lot to young lawyers. If the young lawyers come up with a good idea, they grab it.
We have some exciting events we're going to announce this afternoon that hopefully others are excited about too. And Judge Hanen, on your point about increasing diversity in HYLA, I'm proud that this year, I'm Latina, I'm the president, our president-elect is a Black man, our treasurer is a Black man, and then of course we have Kelly as our secretary. So I'm happy to report that we have a very diverse board.
And with bar associations, you've got to be concerned not only about racial diversity and gender diversity. There's also the diversity of, is it dominated by big firms? Are there solo practitioners? Are we getting people from the corporate side or is it just trial lawyers? I mean, there's a lot of different things that go into trying to make a bar association organization that differ from maybe the general public.
I agree. I think we've done a pretty good job of that this year. One area where we're still not reaching these people is transactional lawyers. We don't have many transactional lawyers on our board or in our membership. So if either of you have ideas for reaching out to them, we definitely want them to be included in HYLA.
Recruit Jason Ryan.
Who's that, Judge Garrison?
Jason was the president of HYLA, so it was me and then Leaf and then Courtney Palm and then Jason, so he would have been 3 after me. He's now general counsel at Centerpoint.
Okay, I just wrote his name down.
Get him involved. But I mean, I think you have to have people that reach out to those people. Like having someone like me go talk to a transactional lawyer is a waste of time. Like I don't know how to sell it to them. I know how to sell it to baby lawyers or young litigators but to sell it to a practice areas, you need to get help from people in that practice area.
Yeah. I'm going to enlist our former president, John Furlow, who's at Kirkland. He's good at enlisting people. He's actually how I first got involved in HYLA. So
it's amazing it's like and then think about all the people that you got involved and they're probably committee chairs now and they're next, they're the leaders in the next 5 to 10 years. And that's how this works.
That works. So I want to ask both of you some questions about your careers and your journey to the bench. So I'll start with you, Judge Garrison. What made you want to go from being a litigator to a judge?
Well, so I came at this sort of a different and a long road. When I started practicing, I didn't have maybe the credentials. That's not fair, but I didn't have the resume that probably would put me on the course to getting a federal kind of appointment, right? But I was a trial lawyer. I was down in the courtroom all the time. And I'm one of those people that love sitting on dockets because I love watching what everybody else does. I love listening to their arguments, thinking about what I would have said, what they should have said, or what the judge should do, or how they should handle it. And I loved that whole thing. And because I was a Democrat, I also sort of was of the opinion back in the early 2000s that we would never see a Democratic judge in Harris County because they were all Republicans at that time. So I sort of had written it off. Even though I loved the idea of it, I didn't see it as realistic for me. And then as times change, it's just sort of one of those things where you just really don't know when opportunity is going to, present itself. And it's kind of, I know this is hokey and everyone's heard it a gazillion times, but it's like when opportunity knocks, you have a choice, and that's open the door or don't. And so while it was something I'd wanted to do and thought was a natural progression for me, I had to wait for that door knock.
Right.
We all do. I mean, there are 24 civil judges in Harris County. I'm guessing, I don't know, are there about 15, 20 federal judges?
Right, that's close.
There's probably 10 magistrates. I mean, those jobs, just that sum total is 60 legal jobs in all of Harris County. I mean, there's criminal judges too, but you don't get to just walk in, right? They're not available for everyone. And so if it's something you want to do, you kind of have to do you're building on everything that you do. How am I going to get to this next spot? You're always doing that. And that way, when the opportunity knocks, you are ready to answer it. So.
And when it knocked, Judge, did you hesitate, or were you ready to go for it?
I hesitated because, right, so like I said, I kind of had written the idea off, and I thought, if I'm going to run for judge, I also wanted to wait till my kids were a little older, because I didn't want to be away from them or out like campaigning. And so when that knock came, I was hesitant because it was sooner than I thought. But ultimately, I kind of, you think about it long enough, and I realized this, if I don't answer the door now, this is 2017, if I don't answer the door now, and the county does flip all the way blue or Democratic, whatever you want to say, I would then have to run against an incumbent in 5 years, 10 years, whatever, when the kids are grown and out of the house. And that really doesn't sound like a good idea. So, I had to really go through the mental exercise of, do I want to put myself through this now? And I did. So, and it worked. So,
Yeah.
So yay.
I remember, Judge Garrison, I think I first met you at a HYLA Women in the Law breakfast that you were at when you were campaigning. I think that's when I first met you. So it's cool to be here today chatting with you as Judge Garrison.
Well, thank you so much. And this is a conversation for another time, another CLE, I think the way we pick judges it's just, we all could, like I said, we could go round and round and round and round about that. I mean, and I hate the fact that I had to run against another judge to get my job. Basically had to go to somebody else and say, I'm going to try to take your job away from you. And Judge Wilson, I have so much respect for him, and he was such a good judge. But unfortunately, this is the system that we have now. But if there's somebody out there that thinks, gosh, in 10, 15 years or whatever, I want to do something like this, just start putting the plan into place. Like, how are you going to be ready when that opportunity comes so that you can take it and start. I did the same. I'm sorry, I don't mean to keep talking, but I did the same thing when I got my board certification. I originally thought, gosh, maybe I'd love to become like this, like appellate specialist. But I didn't clerk at the First Court of Appeals or the Supreme Court. And so how am I going to do that? And I don't have the resume. So I have to put a plan together. Okay, well, I'm going to get board certified. Okay, how am I going to do that? And I put a whole matrix together of how, like, what I needed to do as far as different cases I had to handle and different things that I had to be involved in. And it was like, I just put the plan down on paper. And as I did, made those accomplishments, it's like, just check, 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 check. And you just put the plan into action. So if it's something you want, just start thinking, how do I get there? What does that plan look like?
Yeah. Well, it worked out for me because Judge Wilson now sits down the hall for me when we were in the office at Sussman Godfrey. So I get to, ask him questions in the benefit of his years of experience.
Well, it worked out for him because I'm guessing that he's making a whole lot more money. I'm just teasing. I'm just teasing. He didn't need it. He didn't need it.
Judge Hanen, how about you? When did you decide, and how did you decide that, hey, I think I want to do it?
Probably something I had in the back of my mind the entire time I was, practicing law, because I clerked for the Supreme Court of Texas for Justice Greenhill, and he and I were very close, and I found him to be not only a mentor, but also be very inspirational. But then when I got out in practice, I also thought, I had some judges, I thought, I could do this a lot better than he's doing it or she's doing it. And
I bet I could name at least 5 of those people.
Yeah, I'm not naming names. So it was always something I had in the back of my mind. Now, you have to remember that when I was in HYLA and working my way that way was kind of the 80s. In the 80s, we had the political sweeps that Judge Garrison was referring to, but we had them go every 2 years one way and every 2 years the other way. So, I mean, there was no job security at all to be an elected judge. I mean, some good friends of mine, the wife got appointed to be a judge as a Democrat and got beat 2 years later as a Republican sweep happened. The husband got appointed to be a judge as a Republican and got beat 2 years later as a Democratic sweep came. So there's literally no job security. So it is something you have to weigh, because what you're doing is you're giving up your practice, and people don't think about that even as a federal judge, as a nominee, your clients quit calling because they don't think you're going to be there. They think you're going off to the federal bench never to be seen again. And so, 2 years later, if you get beat or you don't get confirmed, as the case may be, there you are. So
yeah,
you don't go into these decisions lightly.
Well, now that you are both judges and have been judges for a while, what are your favorite and least favorite parts of the job? Judge Hanen, maybe you can go first this time.
Well, my favorite part of the job is having good lawyers try an interesting case. I mean, there's nothing to me, and I mean, that may show what a, bar junkie or whatever you want to call that as, but I mean, to me, it's entertainment. I mean, if you have two really talented lawyers fighting it out in the courtroom, I mean, there's nothing better. It's high entertainment, and I can just sit back and watch it, and I can lean over to my law clerks and go, "Ooh, that was a good cross," something like that, and I get an intrinsic enjoyment out of that. So that's my favorite part of the job.
Yeah. What about least favorite?
Least favorite is having lawyers argue over discovery motions on stuff they should agree on, or taking unreasonable stances, or not. I ought to have a big sign in the courtroom that says "No whining."
just wear a T-shirt.
Yeah.
Put it on your robe.
I think I can do that too. Judge Garrison, what about you? Favorite and least favorite part?
Yeah, I mean, what Judge Hanen said is really that when that is happening in front of you and you're watching good lawyers fight the good fight, right? The fight worth having, you're like in a different, it's like you're in a parallel universe, right? Where you're going, this is the good stuff. And I think, I'll just even expound on that. Then what I love is taking that and the camaraderie with some of the other judges, where you can say, hey, this most interesting case I had, let me tell you kind of what happened. Just like we all have friends or colleagues that we bounce ideas off of, but just other people who you really, really respect and really value their opinions, and who are in it for the right reasons that you're in it for, that you're just like, I call it a law nerd, and I'm a proud law nerd. I do love that. The part I like the least is I push a lot of paper. I mean, I spend every week probably about 2 hours signing non-suits, agreed motions for continuances, going through defaults, going through motions for substituted service. And I have to, that's part of the job, but I feel like sometimes I feel like I'm just part of the system in managing cases. And you just, you need me to sign this piece of paper so you can close the file and move it on down the road. That's my job. I got it. But I don't know. I would rather listen to a discovery fight than consider motions for substituted service.
What advice do you have for young lawyers to make your jobs easier, even those parts of the job that are not as exciting? So just general practice tips.
Do it well. Do it well. Do it like you really care about it. Just as even as routine as the motion may be that you're filing, write it well. Say it well. Get to the point. Just always do your best. And then you become that person Judge Hanen was talking, you become that great lawyer that we like to hear from. Just care and do it. Cite cases, read those cases. It sounds so basic, but so many people don't do these things. And so, yeah, and be nice to each other.
I'll echo that. Don't bury the lead. Get to the point, lead off with what your best argument is, show us why it's your best argument. And then on the more practical side, if you have a big case or a big argument in someone's courtroom, and of course now with the COVID situation, it may be hard to do that or impossible to do it, but go down and watch how that judge conducts hearings. Go down and watch how they like to pick juries, or what do they do during trial. Introduce yourself to their staff, to the case manager, to the court coordinator, and always be nice to them, because remember, they're who talk to the judge. Get yourself familiarized, so then when it's your time to be there, you're going to feel comfortable in the courtroom. You're going to know how it's going to happen, and you can do your best with the argument you have.
Yeah. Judge Hanen, you just mentioned the changing times, and maybe you'll be in a courtroom, maybe you won't. And I do want to ask some questions about how both of your courts have adapted to COVID-19 and the social distancing measures. Have either of you participated in Zoom hearings, and could you say a little bit about that?
Well, I've done Zoom hearings. I don't prefer them, obviously. I'd rather be in the courtroom where you can have more give or take. We've had to do, especially on the criminal side, Zoom hearings because of the transportation of prisoners, and when they move prisoners around, they isolate them. We have to deal with that. I've begun having civil hearings in my courtroom. I had one this morning that was a patent hearing that lasted about 2.5 hours. After it was over, I, off the record, talked to the lawyers about what they thought about the hearing. Did they have any, reticence in coming? Did they feel uncomfortable being there? And really, to a lawyer, I think they appreciated the fact we were trying to move things along and get their cases heard. Now, obviously, as a court, in dealing with juries, it's a whole different subject matter. One, you've got a lot more people just by definition. Jury selection, panels, we're obviously worried about their safety. We're worried about our staff and our lawyers' safety. And then we're worried with regard to juries, okay, given what's happened and so many people have lost their jobs or been laid off or have been away from their jobs and not getting paid, how big of an economic hardship is it going to be on the individual jurors? Is there going to be child care available for people that normally would serve on a jury but can't now because the schools are closed. Of course, it's summertime now, and that leads us to another worry, which is, are we going to get a cross section? Are we going to get a cross section of jurors, or are we just going to have, kind of upper middle class people that can afford not to be at work right now? So we're concerned on a lot of different phases. One, safety, but we're also worried about, jurors are supposed to be a cross section of our community. Are we going to get that cross section?
Right. Judge Hanen, on the hearing you had this morning, were there any measures that were taken that aren't usually taken because of the pandemic? Like, did anyone wear a mask, or were there any shields, things like that?
Well, the lawyers spread out a bunch.
Yeah.
And it was just lawyers, there weren't witnesses.
Lots of hand
Masks
sanitizers.
were optional, but no one spoke at the podium. They all spoke at their chairs. We had the clients were sitting in the back, kind of separated, where normally and even today I would have let them sit at counsel table, but they chose not to. We had a couple people wearing masks. That was fine. And when they came in the courthouse, of course, right now we only allow like 2 people on the elevator at the same time. So it took them a while to get up to the courtroom. Now, everybody seemed to get along fine, and no one seemed to have any problem with it. But before the hearing, my case manager emailed both sides and said, basically, are you all right with this?
Mm-hmm.
With the hearing, and basically offered to move it if anybody, had an objection to appearing. So I think that as a prerequisite maybe made things flow easier, because we knew both sides said, no, we want to be there and want to have the hearing.
And is the courthouse open to the public right now? Can anyone go, assuming they wait such that there's only 2 people in the elevator, that kind of stuff?
Yes, it is open, although you will run a gauntlet of security officers to get anywhere. But it's not to say, some judges are working from home and their staffs are working from home. My full staff is up here, but we've been up here for most of the 3 months because, quite frankly, when March rolled around and everybody kind of shut down, we were in the middle of a trial. So we had probably 10 days of trial when the courthouse was figuratively closed, because we didn't quit in the middle of a trial. Each judge kind of has their own process and their own approach. And as a court, to be quite frank with you, we're working toward and trying to reach a consensus on when we'll start jury trials. And quite frankly, we don't have an answer to that yet. Right now it's scheduled for August, but a month ago it was scheduled for July. So
right.
we've bumped it a month. So, and with the numbers spiking right now as they seem to be, it's hard for us as judges and lawyers to figure out what's going on and what we should do when doctors can't figure that out. Sure,
yeah, of course. Judge Garrison, what's the update from the Harris County courts?
We're similar in that almost every judge is everybody's a little bit different. And I think part of that also depends on what your own personal situation is. So I remember it was March 13th was the Friday that HISD closed down, and we had put in a policy that when HISD closed, we were closing the courts. And so we closed on that day, and I had a morning docket, and half of them showed up, and I finished the docket and I went home, and I probably didn't go back to the building for a month and a half. And since then I've been up there 3 times total. And usually that's just to get the mail. But I'm working from home almost exclusively because everybody's got their own feel about it. I don't mind doing my docket here in my dining room. I was doing it outside when the weather was better, but now I'm inside. I don't mind having a hearing and having to say sometimes to litigants, excuse me real quick, I got to go shut the dog up, or I need to yell at my kid. And I don't mind if they have to do it during a hearing, because this is life and we're making it work. So, but some people that bothers. And so they've done other things. You know, I have had 2 decent sized evidentiary hearings on temporary injunctions, and we did it all on Zoom. And we had to have before we started, we had a conference a couple days before about how we were going to exchange exhibits and how we were going to kind of make all of this work. And the lawyers were cooperative and professional, and we got it done. I had a hearing yesterday on an in-camera inspection on some documents, and the lawyers, they asked me, well, when are you going to be up at the courthouse to pick up these documents? And I was like, gee, I don't know, next Thursday. And they were like, can we just have them delivered to your house? And, I don't want to give the world my address, but, kind of in that cone of trust, I was like, sure. And so the documents should be here this afternoon. And as long as there was no objection from the other side, I just have found that, if you're flexible, you can get it done. We are on an August, well, actually, we have sent out the first call for jurors in the state courts. They're going out in July for a July call, but we have an issue. We have to seat some grand juries. And so we have 5 grand juries that are coming up that actually were held over. Thanks, the governor held them over, and thank goodness to these wonderful citizens that agreed to stay on the grand jury past their term. We have to get those replaced. And so that is the number 1 priority. And so, by the time we get through grand juries, and by the time we get through delayed criminal trials, where we have people sitting in the Harris County Jail, by the time it gets to me, I'm probably the last on the list that's going to get a jury panel. And I mean, I would tell everyone though, because we're doing it this way, there is a different advocacy that goes on, I think, on a Zoom call. Like, invest some time in thinking about that, right? It's different than live. You have to give more consideration to what you're saying, getting to the point, being clear, and you're writing. I've considered so many more things on submission than I ordinarily ever would have. And your writing has become so much more important. So really, before you just haul off and file even a simple motion, craft it, like write it, rewrite it, edit it, because that may be the only time I'm going to hear from you. And so your writing needs to be spot on. And that's what I kept telling people. I was like, I don't need to have an oral hearing. I can read and I understand the law, but it requires that you as an advocate write it well and present it in a digestible form.
And how have attorneys been doing handling the transition? How would you rate them? I would, some lawyers are having trouble with it. And I think, look, we all became lawyers for a reason. We all have certain similar personality traits. We are in control. We like routine. We follow the rules. There's a way you do this, and we're not flexible. But some have been fine with it, right? They took to it like a fish to water. Some judges have taken it to it like a fish to water. Some are still having trouble with it. And so I set a phone conference, and I got an email from a lawyer about how he just could not attend a phone conference on this hearing on a motion. And I was like, does your phone not work? I mean, I don't understand, but what it really probably was, some veiled excuses for, I don't want to do it this way. And I get that. Like, I used to love going down to the courthouse, and
And I always felt that if I could just explain it, it would make the difference. This has made it clear, and I think, you know, actually being on the bench has made it clear. You can explain it really, really well, and that doesn't mean you're going to win if it's not a winning position. You can only take a losing position and make it look so pretty. Usually there's a right answer, and it's usually relatively clear. The ones when it's not clear, those are the good ones we were talking about earlier.
Right.
Judge Hanen, what has your experience been?
Well, we're going to have, first of all, the lawyers have been great. I think they've tried to accommodate whatever we want to do, which of course, if I had a case in front of the judge, I'd try to accommodate the judge. But I think they've adapted as well as we can. To follow up on something Judge Garrison said, you know, about grand jury, we're going to pick grand juries in July. In fact, I'm going to be the one doing it. And we're going to look at that experience and try to see how hard it was and how safe it was. And, you know, we have to do that because of the need for grand juries, but we're going to use that kind of as a guideline for when we might actually start jury trials back. So it's going to be our kind of test case.
And, you know, if I could, I mean, because so many HYLA members, at least it was when it was my experience, were on the civil side. We just didn't have a big representation of the criminal bar. Just remember that, please, to all the people watching. We are juggling, you know, you kind of forget, you get in your own little bubble, right? And you think everybody does what you do. The criminal side of this is a much more complicated issue. And your commercial case or your car wreck case or your employment, whatever that civil case may be, is just taking a back seat right now because we have to do it that way. We can't have people sitting in jail waiting trial longer than they need to be. And we have to have the grand jury in place, and we have to make that work first. So please be patient with us. We are trying. Trust me, all of us want to get back to work too, right? Like at first, quarantine was kind of novel and unique, and you're like, hey, I'm having Zoom happy hours, and hey, I didn't realize that Jenna Hagar Bush was on the Today Show, and she's kind of cute and good, and I like watching it, and oh, Jeopardy's on at lunch. Like that was cute, but that novelty is gone. We all want to go back to work too, but we aren't going to do it in a way that jeopardizes our staffs and ourselves and the litigants that appear before us and the witnesses. And, you know, you're in a big building, I'm in a big building, and yeah, 2 people up an elevator is complicated. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm on the 11th floor. And if you've been in the civil courthouse, you know that you're like a sardine in those elevators that work occasionally. And so we have to figure something out.
Yeah.
So get good at Zoom is what I'm telling you. Get good at Zoom.
That's a helpful tip. Well, I'm going to ask now that any of our attendees who have questions, please raise your hand through Zoom, and hopefully we can have time for a question or two from our attendees if we get any, and to give them an opportunity to raise their hands virtually. Judge Hanen, Judge Garrison, Melanie Guzman, who you met earlier this week, is the co-chair of our Judiciary Committee. She's been helping out with some of our events, and something she's asked some of the other judges we've had events with is what they've been doing to stay sane during COVID-19 and during the pandemic. So could each of you share something that you've enjoyed during this unusual time?
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I haven't had any fun, so I don't know. I've been working. This courthouse is great when there's no one here. You're all by yourself in a 12-story building. You can get a lot of work done. I guess walking my dog is yeah, I always think when I'm walking my dog, unless he's totally misbehaving, and then I have to pay attention to him. But
I'm sure your dog has enjoyed that
I'm
too.
getting my exercise.
You know, I've done a lot of stuff around my house. Because all of a sudden, because I think I'm here, I'm paying attention to it a little bit more. And during the first part of the whole quarantine is not the right word, but whatever we're going to call it, right? The shutdown. You know, my kids were still in school. And so I was having trouble like keeping them engaged in, you know, they'd finish all their lessons in an hour and a half. And I'm like, no, you're still in school. We're going to do something. And so we had a lot of art projects and we had a lot of reading projects. And I'm sure a lot of your people that are your members and people that are watching had to deal with kids at home and juggling, becoming, you know, the homeschooler in chief. And so we did a lot of that. My back fence, we painted a lot of portraits on it. So I have a huge Captain America. I have a huge rainbow. There's a huge Oklahoma State, Go Cowboys logo back there. It kind of looks like crazy people may live here, but that's okay. I mean, I've walked a lot. I've gotten a lot more exercise than I ever have, but I'm surprisingly not losing any weight, which is probably because I've cooked more. We make desserts more. We're doing all that stuff.
Testing out pie recipes.
Pies. I mean, yeah, you name it. Thank God they didn't close down Specs. No, I'm just teasing.
Well, I don't see any raised hands, so I'm going to selfishly ask one more of my own questions. I'm curious, as leaders in our community and former HYLA presidents, what each of you sees as the role of HYLA right now during the pandemic, during this movement involving racial justice, you know, during the crazy year that's been 2020. What do you see as HYLA's role?
I'll take that if you want.
Go ahead.
You know, I think it's not, this is unique. We've never faced this before, but HYLA as an organization has faced difficult times before. So a couple years before me was when we had Hurricane Katrina. And all of a sudden, you know, our shift became, you know, not so much that we were concerned about if we were having animal adoptions at the mall, but how are we facilitating pro bono clinics down at the Astrodome? How are we? And so it just kind of like the leadership especially shifted into that high gear. And I think that's probably, I'm sure Harvey was the same way. And I'm sure, you know, there's, you name it. And so I think it's just about rising to the occasion. And again, and this comes back to what I was saying earlier, because HYLA is made up of young people who are flexible and creative. You come up with solutions. I know, you know, you were talking about how do we stay connected when we can't be connected? How do we network when we can't be in the same room with each other? And you were talking about having these events like a book club. Okay, yeah, that might be a little like hokey kind of, but I mean, I love book clubs. So that's, well, I don't love book clubs. I love going to book club. I don't read the book.
Hearing about the book and drinking some wine. Yeah.
I'm that guy. But, you know, that's an excellent idea. And it's going to require innovation. And people are going to have to be flexible and creative and you will. But I think you stay true to those core tenets of, you know, what we do best. And that is continuing education. That is fostering pro bono opportunities. That is fostering community service opportunities. And, you know, I mean, especially, you know, I saw people down at protests and riots and it's hard because it's COVID too, but, you know, how are we helping to help people who otherwise can't afford access to justice get legal representation? And so it's staying true to what we've always been about.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
An additional issue in Houston that has taken a back seat to the two issues that Judge Garrison met, and that is, you know, with the price of oil going down the way it has, you know, our local economy probably has created more people that need help and can't get it and can't afford it. And so, I mean, HYLA is the one thing you have is you have youth and you have energy and you have ability. And there are going to be a lot of opportunities, and you can try different things. And there may be things that work, or maybe things that don't work. You know, you may have some kind of pro bono clinic in a certain place doing a certain thing that falls flat on its face. No one comes. Okay, we tried it. But that's the kind of thing, and I'll use the term big bar again, but that's the kind of thing they're not going to do.
Yeah.
They don't want to do something and spend their resources and time and money and all that kind of stuff on something that isn't almost an assured success. And that's where HYLA can step in and has always been stepping in as to, okay, we tried it. We'll try it again. Didn't work this 2 times. Let's try something else. But nothing ventured, nothing gained.
Well, thank you both. I know it's now 2 minutes over time. We do have one question, if you guys don't mind.
Sure.
Okay. Callan, you want to unmute yourself? You can ask your
Yeah,
question.
sure. First off, thank you all both for making the time. My question was kind of in regards to the efficacy of some of the Zoom hearings. You know, I'm always curious how often judges actually have their mind changed during an oral argument. And then I was wondering if y'all had, you know, if there's even enough of a sample pattern here for you to tell whether you're finding that to be less the case or even more the case during these Zoom hearings.
I think that, you know, my mind doesn't necessarily get changed, but sometimes I don't understand the facts as well as I need to. And so oral arguments and oral hearings to me, a lot of times it's about educating myself on what's really going on. You know, a lot of times I have hearings too where I just need to sit down with the lawyers and be like, why is this out of control? And how do we get this? How do I bring it back in? And so for that purpose, Zoom has been the exact same as having actual people in front of me, because you are actually right in front of me. And so I have found it to be just as helpful in that regard. The substantive, like if I read a motion for summary judgment and I'm pretty convinced it's going one way, it's probably the exact same on Zoom too, because I'm probably not going to get my mind changed. I've had my mind changed one time that I can think of on a big motion. Twice now, actually twice.
Yeah, you've usually read the law, you understand the facts, and oral argument doesn't necessarily change anything. The hearing I had today was a Markman hearing in a patent case, and that was important to be in person because they actually brought the product in, and I could see what they were arguing over, and they brought in what the infringing or the allegedly infringing product was, and I could see the differences, and I didn't have to rely on the drawings that were actually on the patent, which quite frankly were almost indecipherable. And so there are some things you just can't do over Zoom. But most of the time, especially, and I think Judge Garrison hit it right on the head, when you're really saying, I can't figure out what's going on here, you know, getting the lawyers, and you can even do it by phone sometimes if it's quicker, getting them on the phone together and say, tell me what's actually happening here and why are we fighting over this? And that Zoom is great for.
And sometimes, you know, like it gets back to writing and writing well. And I think as Judge Hanen said, like getting to the point fast. A lot of lawyers start motions and here's who the parties are. And here's where this is a summary judgment. And here's the standard. And I don't mind when people put that in. I don't read it unless I need to because it's important for that motion. But there's 5 pages of writing before you even tell me it's a breach of contract case. Like, tell me that right off the bat. So I automatically filter in my, okay, we're in contract world. Okay. This is a summary judgment on limitations. Ooh, now I even know right what we're talking about. And so when the writing isn't very good or it's buried, the point is buried in all this. And where I really see it is in cases where people just cut and paste the same, let me tell you the story of my case in every motion. And it's the same fact pattern that they put on their motion for continuance that they put on their motion for summary judgment. And I'm like, okay, what are we talking about? And I just need you to get to the point, and answer a few questions that I might have. Tell me where in the contract it says this. Tell me where in the affidavit your witness says this one factual statement, because I don't want to read the 20 pages. I get lost in it after a while.
And if you're responding to one, tell me where the fact issue is.
Yeah.
Here's the fact issue, Judge, right here.
I one time went to, and I don't mean to take anybody's time, obviously, but I remember Judge Davidson saying this one time, and he said, and you know, I mean, he was a little absolutist, and so it's not as strict as he said it, but he said, if you can't tell me what you want on the first page of your motion, you need to sit down and rethink your motion. And I'm like, you know what? There's some truth to that. This is a motion. This case is this is a fraud case. Filed the summary judgment motion because there's no reliance, or there's a contractual disclaimer of reliance. This is why you grant the motion. And on the flip side, Judge, this is why you don't, because there's a fact issue on whether or not this really happened. That's so incredibly helpful and powerful. And yeah, I hope that answered your question. as I went off on a soapbox.
No, that was great. Thank you so much.
Well, Judge Garrison, Judge Hanen, thank you both so much for your time today. We really appreciate it. And I'm going to share my screen now for our attendees. You do get CLE credit for this. So this is the CLE number, and we'll follow up with an email to everyone who attended with the number as well for those who've already logged off. But if you're still on, jot this down, and you can enter it in the Texas Bar website to get your CLE credit. Thank you guys so much, and I hope you have a great weekend. Happy Juneteenth.
Absolutely. Anytime, always happy to help.